sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives. Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear sisters in Islam, welcome to this very special episode of your program, Dear Sisters. Inshallah, we're going to divide up the program into two parts. The first part, we're going to talk about an issue that is relevant to our sisters. And in the second half of the program, inshallah, we're going to answer some of the questions we've been receiving from you through our email and through Facebook, inshallah. So allow me to take a moment to welcome my guest on this program, Sheikh Ibrahim Zidan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing this afternoon?
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I'm glad, alhamdulillah, that we're bringing our sisters new episodes of this program, inshallah, so that they can benefit more with the night. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. All right, so let's begin with a very, very important issue. A lot of the Muslim youth, even those who do, alhamdulillah, become religious later when they grow up, lacked the foundation, the Islamic foundation. So it was by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that they were guided when they became older. But when they were younger, they didn't have the correct foundation in order to actually push them and to actually guide them in that way without going through the struggle of being on the wrong path and then coming back on the straight path. And that of course leads us to the importance of the role of the mother, not only as someone who provides food, who provides drink, who provides clothing, who provides the basic necessities of life to her children, but someone who actually provides Islamic knowledge. And obviously we have to say in the beginning that in order for that to happen, she herself has to gain knowledge. So let's begin by talking about what are the things that a Muslim woman should know from her deen for herself, and also in order to be qualified, in order to really be a mother, not just someone who feeds the children, but someone who's actually a mother who her main mission is to teach them the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah. It's such an essential issue here, because this is something that we suffer as generations after generations. If the mother is not qualified, if the parents are not teaching the children, the upbringing of the human being is something that is so important, and without the knowledge of the deen of Islam, then we see the outcome that we suffer from all over the world. So the mother, before she's a mother, she needs to educate herself. Basically, when she's a child, it's the responsibility of her parents. If you have a son or a daughter, look ahead of what their future will be by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This young boy will be a father, responsible, he might be a leader somewhere. And the same thing for the girl. So what are you as a parent preparing them to be a leader in the society, or any society, to be an effective person, to have at least a family? This is the smallest unit that a person can lead. And would they be benefiting to the generations to come or not? And this can be in the balance of the good deeds of the parents or the balance of the bad deeds. So such an investment that needs to be done in all levels. So if we talk about the case of someone got married and she didn't have the knowledge, just for the fact that she is married, she needs to gain knowledge. She needs to understand what's being a Muslim. What is the necessary knowledge that she needs to have, because she needs to be there for her husband and she needs to raise her children according to the knowledge that she has. People just raise their children based on culture, what they have been raised with, certain meanings and values. This is not something that it should be acceptable in the deen of Islam. We need to educate ourselves and teach others the knowledge of the deen of Islam. And the knowledge of the deen of Islam is the Quran, the Sunnah, the way of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the early generations of Islam. The most important thing, matters of belief, matters of aqidah. What do we believe in? The story of, or the verses about Luqman, for example, when he said to his son, advising him, this is something that can be a guideline for us. The first thing that he said to his son, لا تشرك بالله, do not associate partners with Allah. Our job as parents, especially and also for the mothers, is to teach the children what is right and what is wrong. This is basically the most important task, to keep on repeating it over and over again, to get them used to what is right. They'll grow up the truth will be easy for them. They don't have to go through so much struggle. And for them to be able, once they grow up, they will be able to differentiate between what is right and what is falsehood. This can never be attained by just being raised whatever different types of upbringing. Has to be based on the Quran and the Sunnah.
So the television cannot raise a child to know what's right and what's
That's
wrong?
the worst environment that a person can be raised. Just kids are, parents sometimes, just to have a peace of mind, they let the children raised by the children, by the television.
Yes, and when we're saying television, we're talking about non-Islamic channels, you know, that have many ideas. Some of them are good, but most of them are bad.
Right, definitely. And that's why we have to play that role as parents and to teach them. You know the story, for example, of the boy and the sorcerer and the king. Although the boy was subjected to the sorcerer, which is falsehood, right? But the rahib, right, the monk, he was teaching him what is right. So the boy was in a difficult situation, but teaching him what is right was a mean for him to save himself from the falsehood that he was receiving from the sorcerer, and that saved him by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So sometimes maybe when we look at our environments nowadays, it resembles the both environments. Our children sometimes they are, you know, they're there with the falsehood. So we need to educate them, and we should remember that story, because once they know what is right and what is wrong, this can be a mean for them to be helped and to be guided.
Inshallah. When we talk practically speaking, what should a mother equip herself with in order to be, again, qualified to be able to teach her children later on?
Right.
Specifically speaking, I mean, we want detailed examples, inshallah.
For sisters, it's one of the sad things is that you won't find in many communities that are well knowledgeable sisters that can teach sisters. They always go to the masjid and there's the imam of the masjid having a day for the sisters or whatever. This is good, mashallah, there's no harm. The Prophet ﷺ used to do that.
Yes,
but besides the teaching, there's something that has to do with the tarbiyah or the upbringing, that it needs a personal relationship. Educating, learning, and then, oh, you did this wrong, you did this right, personal questions, you know, people that they see all the time. And this is how the Prophet ﷺ raised the companions, or the men, if this is not available, they would go back home and they would do the issue of the upbringing to the family. So for women, and we look in the history of Islam, you would find knowledgeable women, many of them, even Aisha, starting from Aisha radiallahu anha, the wives of the Prophet ﷺ, that the companions of the Prophet ﷺ will come to her and they would learn the deen of Islam from her. And that is from one generation to the other. Many of the scholars of the deen of Islam, you would find in their biography, their teachers, women, with the proper etiquettes behind the hijab and so on, but they were knowledgeable women in the religion of Islam, knowledgeable about matters of the deen of Islam, aqidah, fiqh, and so on. Where is that today? Where is that among men, you know, and of course among women? So something has to be done from all different levels, from the levels of those who are in charge of communities, to make this important for the girls when they're young, to teach them, we need to have ulama from women, that they can deal with women and so on. And if this is this is for example, people, those who are leading communities and so on, but on a personal level, learning the basics of the deen of Islam, that it's not permissible to live your life without knowing it. Aqidah, tawheed, the methods of fiqh that you need on a daily basis, how to make salah, what is halal, what is haram, depends on the environment that you're in. If you're in an environment where there's so many doubts are being spread and mocking the deen of Islam or saying things like this, you need to educate your children also about these types of issues. Aqidah will be something that needs to be stressed more and more. So curriculums has to be done. People have to take the efforts, and it's easy by the will of Allah, and we can talk about it in details, inshallah.
Inshallah, I mean, what would it be, like when we talk about curriculums, what would we be speaking about specifically?
A person starting with, for example, Aqidah, and with Aqidah comes the Tawheed and matters of fiqh, right? If a book can be studied from both sides, a simple book, you know, something of course that has to be studied from a sheikh, from someone that is one knowledgeable. There are many means now through the internet or lectures or tapes or whatever, getting to know what are the basic beliefs, learning them. What does it mean to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? What do you have to know when it comes to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Many people, they do not know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes. Learning that, and passing that on to the children in an easy way.
When we talk about the names of attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I've heard from some sheikhs, what they say is it's better not, especially at a basic level, not to talk too much about the names of and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially the attributes, especially like the physical attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What we would say, in the English language would be the physical attitudes. And the reason they say that is because they say we should focus on trying to get ourselves better, and that this issue can cause multiple division in the ummah, and you have different groups, or you call different sects, or different understandings of this issue that can cause more division and therefore more harm than good. What would you say to that?
There's some truth in this, and there's some things that are wrong. For someone that is young, we need to explain to them what they can comprehend. So for them to get to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes, it's very important. But when it comes to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that can cause into their minds to have some resemblance of the human attributes or things of that nature, yes, maybe we can delay that subject till later. But everybody needs to know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful, the all knowledgeable, that He's all watching us, and children would ask questions anyway. And how is He seeing us? And but stressing it from the
where's
very
Allah?
beginning.
Where's Allah? What would you say to that?
Yes, as the Prophet ﷺ, when he asked the young girl, and this hadith in Sahih Muslim, it's a valid question. Actually, we need to ask our children, where is Allah? They should never ever say Allah's everywhere. He's everywhere with His knowledge and power and so on.
There are some songs with that meaning. I mean, some nasheeds, with that meaning that Allah is everywhere.
This is against the proper aqeedah. This is against the proper belief. The Prophet ﷺ, when he asked the young girl, where is Allah? She pointed and she said, fi sama', in the heavens, meaning over the creation, over His creation, subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ said that she's a believer as a result of that. So we need to teach the children these types of things. And they would ask questions anyway. So we always tell them, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Nothing is the like of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's the all-hearer, the all-seer. And we need to always, their actions being linked to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He hears you, He sees you, and so on. And we know the many stories of how to train the kids to be aware and to be a watcher of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, these things fits the nature of the human beings.
I was actually asked by a young child about a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and I'm sure you know the hadith. Says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Adam ala suratihi. Okay, well, I said that last part in Arabic because I guess that's where the differences of opinions are of what His image means. Is it talking about Adam's image? Is it talking about Allah's image? Is it talking about the person? Because this comes in a hadith where avoid hitting a person on the face. So would it be His referring to that person? Your thoughts about that?
Right. It's all the different meanings. They have some valid understanding and beliefs in it. Whether that Adam alayhi salam was created on his own image, which is the image of Adam alayhi salam, or some of the attributes of Adam, as far as the attribute itself, without getting into the details of it.
When we say attributes, are we talking about physical attributes?
Physical attributes.
Because we're saying the word surah, which means image.
Right.
Yeah.
But not in specific and every single detail and every single physical part of the human body. Right? Because we know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has hands and so on. But we always say that this is true, but only to use what is mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah when it comes to the specifics. So for example, if a human being, they would have hands and fingers, we cannot go to that extent because we don't have anything in the revelation that talks about since there is hands, then there is nails, for example. Right? I'm talking about nails, for example. If nails is not mentioned, then we don't say anything about it. It's a matter of unseen to us. And the only way that we get to know the unseen is through the revelation from Allah. But people, they would call those who would say this, that you are basically mujassima, or you're trying to give an image to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, physical image. This is definitely not the case. We're just approving or confirming what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about Himself without resembling that to any of the attributes of the human being, without denying it. Otherwise we'd fall into denying something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah. But to the level of the children, of course, We need to get them to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with His names and attributes without getting into the false sects. They said this, so we refute this by this. You don't confuse the child, you just teach them the truth. And by their nature they'll know.
That child was asking me, does Allah look like us?
Right.
So
of course we would respond and say, no, of course not.
And then he mentioned that hadith.
Right. No, because Allah said, nothing is alike of Him. So anything that comes into your mind, it is not, it's definitely something that is not the case whatsoever. And this is something that we need to, it's a way to teach them how to understand the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and how to have the
Now let's move to the issue of fiqh, because I think that's one of the most important issues, especially relating to women and to young people. I remember one scholar saying that the pillars of Islam are 1/5 of fiqh, or 1/5 of fiqh, and he was wondering, he was saying, how much of that 1/5 do we know? So in reality, how much do we know out of the fiqh in Islam if we don't even know maybe 10 or 20% of the 1/5? But also before that, I want to kind of make a transition between aqeedah and fiqh, as we were saying. I heard someone say once that we shouldn't talk too much about aqeedah and we should talk more about fiqh. And the reason he said that is because he said, when he said that, he didn't mean just to not talk about aqeedah, but what he meant is, if we have questions, we shouldn't be asking questions about aqeedah, rather we should be asking questions about fiqh. And his reasoning was that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran mentions the word yas'alunaka, they ask you, he says, I believe 13 times, according to what he said, and he said all of them were relating to fiqh. He said, when we're talking about Muslims, when Muslims were asking the Prophet ﷺ, they were asking about fiqh, they weren't asking him about aqeedah. What are your thoughts on this issue as we transition from aqeedah to fiqh, the other pillar of the foundation of a Muslim child?
The aqeedah is basically the unseen, and that's why the unseen is something that is so unlimited. We don't ask, we learn. We learn what is our aqeedah. So it's a valid question to say, what is our aqeedah? What is our beliefs? So you get to learn that one issue after the other from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ.
Yes.
But to ask about something that is so vast and so unlimited, in that context, maybe this is not the good way, but we need to, definitely, this is the most important thing. This is the foundation of the deen. And when we talk about aqeedah, it's not just about matters that are unseen to us like the angels and so on. It's our aqeedah, our belief when it comes to the Quran, to the Sunnah, to the companions of the Allah, the things that the Ummah split on. How can we protect our children and ourselves from disbelievers' beliefs and from the beliefs of those who are deviants? What is our belief when it comes to the companions of the Allah? Can that be left like this? It's a matter of belief because it's mentioned in the Quran. So we raise them to love.
So it's not a matter of politics,
it's
some people say.
It's not a matter of history.
Aqeedah.
Right? It's not matters of history even. It's a matter of aqeedah because it's mentioned in the Quran that Allah is pleased with them and they are pleased with Him. So we have to raise the children to love the companions of the Allah. This is one of the ways of them to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is in the books of aqeedah. And many issues, the issues of matters of tawheed, the oneness of worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does that mean?
Yes.
The thing that the Prophet ﷺ, they fought against the people of Quraysh and they fought against the Prophet ﷺ when they believed in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is the creator, the sustainer. But why then they were called disbelievers? Because they would take intercessors, seeking their intercession between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Images of pious people, righteous people and so on. That's why we need to teach the children the tawheed and even shirk. When we teach matters of fiqh, which is definitely important,
yes.
We teach them how to do salah and what the things that negates the salah. We teach them how to make wudu and what the things that breaks the wudu. The same thing, what are the things that breaks one's Islam, that negates one's tawheed? They need to learn that. You keep repeating even to them that this is the truth and this is falsehood. This is truth and this is falsehood. So that they would always love the truth and they would stay away from what is falsehood. And the issue of we should not talk too much about the aqeedah because it brings split to the ummah. Our job is not to unite the ummah. Our job is to hold fast to the truth. This is a very important point. Definitely we would love the ummah to be united. But what if it's united on falsehood? Then everybody goes to the hellfire? This is not a goal. The goal is to be holding fast to the truth and to unite everybody on the truth. So we need to define the truth. We need to hold fast to the truth. We need to educate ourselves and teach others what the truth is, so that they would unite around the truth. So,
Jazakallah khair, barakallah feek. So now let's move on to fiqh. What specifically, when it comes to fiqh, should we be teaching our children, and how young should we start?
when we talk about teaching the necessary knowledge that every Muslim is supposed to know, we know that the most important deed after the Tawheed is the Salah. So how to perform the Salah? And that's why when we see the orders of the chapters in the books of fiqh, it starts with the Tahara, purity, how to make wudu, how to purify ourselves, what are the impurities, right? What are the manners and the etiquettes to enter the bathroom, and so on, and then how to make our Salah. And when we teach matters of fiqh, even very small and details about this, we teach it with aqidah, that we're doing this because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. And this is the way of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So they're always linked to this, with the ikhlas, the sincerity, and following the way of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam. Not that I would say to my child, I will teach you the salah according to Al-Imam Abi Hanifa or Imam Al-Shafi'i. This is not how to teach the children, right? You can teach them the way of, or the opinion of Imam Hanifa, Imam Al-Shafi'i, and so on, but you are raising them that this is the way of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, according to the best of my knowledge. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli. Pray in the same manner that you saw me pray. The same way. Why this is halal, why we eat this, why we can't eat this, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. And He owns us. He's the creator of the heavens and the earth. And we need to have that submission. It's not just about because this is good and this is evil, it makes us sick and so on. What if it doesn't make, I could say many people are eating it doesn't make them sick.
Yes.
It's deen. It's about the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are nothing but servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes, and I think there's one very important point when it comes to fiqh that I think even as adults we fall into it, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but even that we should even begin with children and let them know from the beginning that this is the issue. Now here's the issue. For example, if someone does the prayer correctly, a parent would tell them, your prayer is accepted. They wouldn't tell them your prayer is sahih, for example, okay, that your prayer is correct. What would be the difference between saying to your child, or talking to children now, that your prayer is accepted and your prayer is correct, and what would be the correct one to say?
Accepted, it's something that is unseen to us. We don't know. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَتَقَبَّلُ اللَّهُ مِنَ الْمُتَّقِينَ. Allah accepts those who have taqwa. So we need to teach them these meanings, that your salah is physical, and more importantly, something that is inward, something that your heart has to be with devotion and with sincerity and the fear of Allah and so on. And we remind them of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that some of you would finish the salah and only 1/10 of the reward is given, 1/9, 1/8, and so on, according to how much devotion and concentration that a person would have. So teaching it this way, and teaching them that if you do the physical actions in the proper way, your salah is valid, meaning you don't have to repeat it. You don't have to make another rak'ah, make sujood sahwa, for example, the physical part of it. But as far as being accepted or not, this is unseen to us, and that's why we have to be on our guards till the moment of death. So that's why after we finish the salah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness because of the deficiencies that we do. So to say that it's accepted like this, it's basically going into the unseen and seeing basically behind what we see with our own eyes, whether the prayer is accepted or not.
Alhamdulillah. All right, so an issue relating to prayer. Obviously, we should teach our children to come with us when they're young, to come pray, for example, with the dad at Salatul Jum'ah, or if the sister is going to the masjid, to take her children with her, as long as, of course, preferably that they don't make noise. But when children do get older, we're talking about maybe 12 or 13, some parents complain that they would go pray Salatul Jum'ah and their child would refuse to come to Jum'ah with them, saying, for example, either it's not important, or the more likely reason is I slept really late last night and I can't come to Jum'ah. And I mean, I see this even in Muslim countries. I see more fathers in the masjid than children, even during Salatul Jum'ah. I'm not talking about other prayers. I'm talking about even during Salatul Jum'ah. I mean, if we think about it mathematically, each one of these men has maybe at least, 2 or 3 boys, and maybe a couple of young girls, where are those, especially those who are adolescents or those who, have reached the age of puberty?
Wallah, it works with being or teaching the children early on. 7 years old is the age where the child is to be ordered to make the salah. And when they're 7 years old, they're not rebellious. They don't refuse. They love it so much.
Yes, and you can give them candy too if they go.
Right. And actually, you only have even to do anything. They love it so much that they be with their father or whatever.
They're still on the correct fitrah.
Right. So once they're 7, even before 7 years old, you'd find them imitating, but you don't tell them anything. Before they're 7 years old, you need to prepare them mentally. That you're now about to reach an age where the Prophet ﷺ said that you're supposed to pray all the prayers. The men in the household, if they don't go to the masjid, then how would we expect the children to go to the masjid? Yes. So if you were satisfied with not going to the masjid as a human being, individually living alone, it's your own fault, something between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But once you have a family and you have children, then your, forgive me, the evilness would go beyond just yourself. You are raising the child to undermine the salah. It's not that important. That our life is more, you wake them up for school and you make sure that they would not miss this whatsoever. But when it's time for the Fajr salah, oh, he slept late, this and that. What does that tell the child? You're basically bringing the child that salah is not important. The purpose of life becomes disturbed into the minds of the child. The most important thing is the deen. The thing that drives us, makes us stand and sit and walk and eat is the deen of Allah, the religion of Islam. So when the father goes to the masjid and he takes the child and he even tells the people, the community in the masjid, that my child is about to be 7 years old. So when I bring them, I want you to encourage them. And I want you to make them feel that they are important and don't just ignore them. That makes a big difference to the child. You can even do some little things, as some of the ulama, they said. Buy them a watch when they're 7 years old, right? Because now you need to know the time and for the salah and so on. Even testing the child after taking them to the masjid for some time, you tell them, for example, let's not go to the masjid for Isha prayer today, and see what his response will be. You say, oh, that's fine, I have to listen to my father, or he would say, this is the deen of Allah and I cannot, because you've been teaching them that all the time. So say this is what we're supposed to do. Once they're 10 years old, where the punishment is supposed to be there, if they neglect their salah, you won't have to punish, because it becomes part of their system.
SubhanAllah, when we think about this issue, we're thinking really to develop them in order to become servants of Allah, not just a follower of his dad, because that's what the people previous to Islam used to do. They just said we are following our fathers.
Right. It's a very important point. Why? Because this is basically the upbringing. We need to upbring children that they would be slaves of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their obedience to Allah is unconditioned whatsoever. That's why you test this. Of course, part of the deen of Allah that they are obedient to the parents. But what if the parents are ordering them to do something that is haram?
There's no obedience to the creation and the disobedience of the Creator.
Right. And that's what we need to basically clean and make sure that the children are raised with this matter so clear to them. And we would encourage them. Sometimes even when it comes to lying, and many of the children, they lie, for example, you will be upset more that they lie, more than the fact that they did something wrong.
Yes, they lie to you.
Right.
Then they did something wrong. SubhanAllah. Right. We're going to take a short break, inshallah. We'll come back. We want to talk about more of teaching them the pillars of Islam, especially the issue of zakah and the issue of fasting, for example, at a young age. The issue of Hajj, we'll also talk about it, but I think at most Islamic schools, they teach them that already. So, my dear brothers and sisters, we're going to take a short break, inshallah. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this issue, and then we'll take some of your questions that we've been receiving through Facebook and our email as well, inshallah. Stay with us.
Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah.
In a game of golf, both the caddy and the golfer have the same goal: to get the ball into the hole. Interest-free banking is similar. With a clear view of the fairway, a predefined agreement without shifting targets, things should end up where you want them. Your deposits are safe, and your funds are ethically managed with a transparent and equitable approach to sharing risk and reward. No interest burden means more time to relax without the worry of nasty surprises. Rest assured, our interest is mutual. Jazz Bank, Nigeria's first full-fledged non-interest bank.
Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasul.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My dear sisters in Islam, welcome back to your program, Dear Sisters. We are continuing, inshallah, to talk about the ways of teaching our children the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at an early age. And Sheikh Ibrahim, before the break, we talked in detail about how to teach them salah early and some of the challenges that you may face later if you don't teach them salah earlier. Let's talk a little bit. Obviously, this is a subject that needs a lot of discussion. We have just a few minutes to talk more about this issue, and then we want to go to the many questions that we've been receiving from our sisters. What should we do when it comes to teaching them, for example, the issue of zakah? In a broader sense, not just only zakatul mal, but the idea of giving in general and sharing with those who are less fortunate.
It's something that we talk about it all the time in front of them, and by our own actions. And action speaks louder, of course. So when the child with the father or the mother, they see that this is part of their household, that they always giving. And the concept of giving is not just giving money, it's giving time, giving from one's effort and energy and status and everything. And saying that to the children, that we're giving not because people are in need, but we're giving because this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us to do. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the owner of all things. And He's the one that ordered us to give, and there's something obligatory and something that is optional. So, and always make them very close to the religious meanings of things, not the physical things. When you give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will replace.
Yes.
Allah will bless you wealth. You're seeking the rewards in the hereafter. We're not seeking it in this life. And you keep on repeating this with your actions, definitely this would be of an effect, raising generous human beings.
And subhanAllah, there are multiple ways of giving, and I think as a parent, we should be creative, I think.
Right.
I'll give you a suggestion and tell me if this is Islamically correct or not, okay? We have to be practical. Many parents, they not only allow their kids to celebrate their birthdays, but they encourage them and they provide gifts for them and things like that on their birthday. Would it be okay to try something different? Maybe not on the day of their birthday, but around the time that their birthday is in, to tell them, okay, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed you, with more time on this earth. Instead, look at your friend such and such. He's celebrating his birthday, and his parents are giving him gifts, and they're having a big party and everything. Ask him, imagine how much that costs, and he throws out a number, maybe $200 or $300 for the event. Tell him, well, how about we take these $200 or $300 and give it to poor people? Would that be something okay?
If it's something that comes up as the child feels that he is in need of something like this because he sees others doing it. But if it doesn't exist, we should not, bring even the subject up. We just raise them that this does not exist, and we make many good occasions in their life. But if it's an environment where the child would see this and why I'm not having this and while others are having it, mashallah, this can be a good thing without having a celebration, of course, or anything of that nature. Yeah. And giving them to give charity, even giving them from their allowance. And tell them, buy something for your friends. It's cool. Be generous, right? And it's a balance. Instead of just telling them to waste or to just take the money and get rid of it, you have to teach them how to save and how to be generous and how to give others, and always seek the rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You're not doing that for a return from them. You're doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone. So the husband can have more than one different venue of giving charity by giving the wife, and she gives charity. She gets reward and he gets rewards. Giving the child and he gives charity. Both get rewards. And so on. So this is one of the ways to be done, and explaining, teaching them how to, for example, zakah and why the wisdom behind it and so on.
Okay, let me ask you a kind of a silly question, but I think that it's important. Are you able to predict, or are there certain indications or signs that your child will later on in life become one of the miserly types of people, and then he will become a miser? And how can you solve that if there is such a way to to find that out?
Human beings are by nature, they are, they love for themselves.
To acquire and not to give.
That's right. وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. They love al-khayr, and as Ibn Abbas said, wealth. And you see that in the child when they're so young. It's my toy, it's my thing. So it's something that you have to do to encourage them to do otherwise. So you can sense that, of course, one child different than the other. So that's why upbringing, it's not an easy thing. It's a, I don't want to say a full-time job, it's a 24 hours job. And that's why people, when they belittle such a thing, and the mother, for example, she can go out and work and neglect the children, and they're raised by daycares or television. Who's going to teach them these values? And it's not something that you'd give a lecture. You would say it to the child, come, I would just teach you some upbringing values. No, it's something that you would teach, you would talk, and you would do actions, and you would go out of your way to implant that in them.
Like we said, we have to be creative.
Right.
Because children will get bored. If it's, okay, it's lecture time now, and then every single time it's a lecture, or every single time it's a game, they'll even get used to that, and and it won't make a difference for them if you're going to give them a reward. So I guess we have to be creative in the ways. And as you said, subhanAllah, I really love what you said. It's not a full-time job, because what we know is a full-time job, it's 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. But a 24/7 job, and I think any mother who's watching us from, I don't even want to say from birth, but from pregnancy, she begins to realize that.
And one of the very important things is the dua. Because you can teach and you can say and you can do whatever you want.
Yes.
But guidance is in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yes.
So the dua, making sure that your money comes from halal. There's no haram in the household. All of these things affects the upbringing of the children. So a child being raised with halal money, no haram penny enters your household, and you're making dua, and you're focused on raising them and teaching them what is right and what is wrong, by the will of Allah, never fails.
بإذن الله تعالى. All right, let's switch gears just a bit in this last, about 15 or 20 minutes of the program, inshallah. Let's take some questions that we've been receiving on Facebook. A lot of questions, mashallah, coming in for you. When they know Sheikh Ibrahim Zidan is here, then especially the sisters, they send in a lot of questions. So alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Sister Mu'mina says that she's engaged to someone. She says if it's okay to talk to him with her parents' knowledge.
Engaged meaning it's nothing but a promise to get married. So engagement has nothing to do with making what is haram halal. There's still, the relationship is a haram relationship when it comes to be alone, or taking off the hijab, or whatever there is. So and since the engagement in Islam is a promise to get married, it's permissible for them to see each other and to meet in the presence of the mahram, just to see whether they would go forward and do the marriage or not. Once they make the decision, they see each other, they talked in the presence of the mahram, and they said, that's it, yes, we want to go forward, and the marriage will be at such and such date. There is nothing whatsoever permissible between them. Actually, it's very dangerous to go forward. Somebody might say, but I didn't know the person well. Then get to know them. Get to know the things that you need to know without having to see them first. Because once this time of engagement, people basically, I don't want to say fake, but they don't show their real nature because they're not living together yet. So you would never get to know the attributes of the person by seeing them more and more. You would get to know that by asking about the person, whether it's among the religious people, among those who are righteous in the masjid and so on. But anyway, they are strangers to one another. So unless there is something very important for them to know, then they should be away from each other till the day where they do the marriage contract, because they already decided that they would get married.
Barakallahu feek. We have another question from Sister Saydin. She says, what is the Islamic ruling on poor Muslim women, like in the Philippines or Indonesia, who work as housemaids in the Middle East?
Wallahi, this is one of the sad issues and one of the problems basically that are present in some societies, and the ulama, they talked about that. A woman should not travel without a mahram, and should not reside in a place without a mahram, and in a household where there are men and grown-up children and so on, and she is a woman and there is free mixing. This is definitely something that brings many evil.
Forgive me for asking, but isn't that, of course it's not the same, we're talking about free women here, but isn't that related to the concept of having a khadima in Islam who could be a slave, or we're talking about something different?
That's totally different. Slavery is one thing, and to be a servant is a totally different thing. To be a servant, that means this is basically a job with a salary and so on.
Yes.
The person is not being enslaved whatsoever, right? So in that case, she is, she's on her own. She's not owned by anyone.
Yes.
So
if we take out, I mean, obviously that's the case, but if we take out that part out of it, isn't it kind of the same? I'm talking about the symptoms. As you said, there's free mixing. For example, if there's a need in a household to have someone to help, with the dishes, to someone to help with the cleaning.
Sure.
And some people may say, for example, that we have good intentions. We want the mother to focus on the actual tarbiyah, the actual upbringing, and we leave the household responsibilities.
Actually, having a servant is absolutely fine. It's a good thing. And even some of the ulama, they said this is one of the necessities. For those who have means, of course, is to have a servant. Because if a person has the means, and having a servant would allow the person to do more productive things, and it helps basically the servant to helping them financially and so on, but without committing sins, right? So if we create the environment where women are with the women and they're not intermingling with the men and so on, that's fine. But anything that would lead to what is haram, that's something that has to be avoided. And these poor women, it's our job actually as Muslims. Why would we allow a poor woman to do something haram or to travel far away to just earn some money? Where is the Muslims? Where are the responsibilities of the Muslims? This is one of the downfalls as a result of people withholding the zakah. It's the responsibility of the community. This is how the deen of Islam gives the rights of the people in any society that they're in. A Muslim woman should be dignified and honored. She doesn't have to work. She doesn't have to earn money for herself. It's the responsibility of the Muslims to provide for her. And she would stay in whatever level she's in and to be provided for, so that she would take care of whatever other responsibilities for her. But
so practically speaking, what should the sisters do? I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I know there's quite a few sisters who are working in the Middle East and they're watching Huda TV, and they're working as as maids in houses. Obviously, they're the ones who speak English because they come from different parts of the world where English is spoken. For example, the Philippines, Indonesia, Nigeria, Uganda, and they come and they live in Middle Eastern households. Of course, there are many success stories. I remember actually about a month ago, we had a sister call in and she accepted Islam, who was a maid at someone's house in the UAE, I believe. But what advice would you give them specifically as they're watching us?
To fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not to commit sins. Put your trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that sustenance and provisions is in the hands of Allah. You don't have to commit sins to gain that. And I'm not saying that the job in itself is not permissible. I'm saying what comes with the job. So if that is to be avoided, then definitely there's no harm. So trying to do the proper environment with the proper people. Some people, if they are righteous and so on, they would create the proper environment. So she would be serving only in whatever, protecting her from away from free mixing and so on.
But the issue of traveling and of residing in a foreign country, would their situation be a situation of necessity then, since they're not traveling for something that's optional? For example, Hajj would be optional for a person who doesn't have a mahram. Meaning, when I say optional, meaning it's not a requirement. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not make a requirement for a person who's unable to do so. Or for Umrah, for example, which is optional. Or for leisure activities. We're talking about someone who's traveling for necessity, maybe because out of the very little money that they're making, it's a lot of money back home, and it helps, for example, a sick mother or a sick husband who's unable to work. And like you said, maybe they live in a non-Muslim land. that's majority non-Muslims. They come originally from that country, so there's not that zakah environment, and maybe they live in a Muslim country where the zakah is not being implemented, Allah musta'an, as in most places in the world.
Wallahi, with this, because each environment is different, each case is unique, the advice is, if they should be concerned, and they should ask the people of knowledge in that community that they are in. They know better the reality of the society and so on, and they can even find means of help to them. And at all cases, never commit sins. That people should be steadfast and fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're already there, they're already present in the place. Then go ask the people of knowledge in that community, in that environment, and maybe there might be ways, if they are involved in some form of things that is not according to the deen of Islam, then they should avoid it. How to avoid it, how to implement what is right, I think the people of knowledge in the environment that they live in is more applicable in this.
Jazakallah khairan. Sister Hafsa, she's asking if it's allowed to say Merry Christmas to a Christian friend, and obviously she's Muslim.
Right. We as Muslims, we are ordered to, whatever things in our heart, things we say with our tongues, things we do with the different parts of our bodies, all according to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. We cannot say something that it's against our belief. You know, pleasing others just to please them, this is not a goal in our life, but to please them with the truth. So what does it mean to say Merry Christmas? Right? We have to be honest and truthful. So celebrating something that is against our belief, right? Imagine someone is celebrating something to say bad things about the Prophet ﷺ, for example. Should we tell them, you know, happy holiday for that? Of course not. The same thing, Isa alayhi salam, the son of Mary, he was not crucified. This is what we believe. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised them. So for someone to believe other than this, it's not something that we should congratulate them for such a thing. We don't do anything. We're not going to harm them either, right? But we don't say anything. This is against our belief.
Yes.
And people respect that, basically. We're not saying anything bad, we're not saying anything evil to them. But when it comes to matters of religion, there is matters of aqidah and belief that we have to draw the line. And to be kind to others, somebody would say, but you people become rude like this. And Islam always orders us to be kind and so on. We forget all kindness except in the day when there's Christmas. Where's the rest of the year? You say this to your neighbors, to your someone that works with you. Where are you the whole year? Why don't you get them a gift every week, right? Without any reason. I just like to give you a gift,
yes.
Right? You're nice to the person. You do whatever it takes. Once you are being nice like this, when it comes to these issues, they would never consider that as being rude, because you're already being someone that is decent and nice and so on.
So it's a long-term relationship.
Right, but the problem is we don't do anything, and we just, once there is something like that, we expect it to say something. And words, people are just, forgive me for the expression, but many people, they live a fake lifestyle. It's just about words. You know, even have a nice day, right? Sometimes I feel that there's no sincerity in saying it. You as a Muslim, you should say it in a sincere way. You really mean it when you say to someone, have a nice day. Not just because your job is in customer service and you want to make money out of this. No, in Islam we have to be truthful. And we need to have this sincerity towards others. So being honest with ourselves, we do not say such a thing, but at the same time we are kind to others throughout the whole entire year, but without having to do anything with matters of religion or undermining the principles of the deen of Islam.
Barakallahu feek. Another sister, she's asking about wearing t-shirts, even maybe at home, that have cartoons on them, and would it be a problem for her to pray in such attire?
Well, if the image or the picture is of something that if it's blown in life, it will have life, then it's not permissible. But if it's something that doesn't make sense, you know, it's no image whatsoever, just, you know, a hand of a bird and a leg of an animal, something like this, then it's okay, but without this big, clear image of something that has a soul. So cartoon images, it's one of the tricky issues. Some cartoon images are images of human beings, but they look funny, right? But if it's a cartoon image that you don't know this is an animal or a human being, something does not exist in life, it's tricky, it's better to avoid it, but it's totally different than something that a human being or an animal is clearly a picture of that should be avoided. A person should not pray in such a thing.
And then what if a person does pray? Would that in any way invalidate the prayer?
No, the salah is valid, but this is not permissible. Takes away from
Jazakallah
the
khair.
wudu of the salah.
Tabarakallah feek. We have a lot of questions from sisters. This question is actually asked by a brother, but in reference to sisters. He says in the country that he's in, and he's talking about a country that there's a Muslim majority. He says that the sisters do dress, but part of their chest is showing. Not showing as in its outlines, but actually showing. You know, flesh is showing. So he's asking, what should be the advice to them?
This is definitely not permissible. The hijab for women is to be covered from head to toe, and this is definitely a part where it's not permissible whatsoever to be uncovered. And the ayah in the Quran is clearly stating that يُدْنِينَ عَلَيْهِنَّ مِنْ جَلَابِيبِهِنَّ, that they would bring down from their jilbab, and the word khimar is mentioned also. So it is haram, it is not permissible. People need to be advised. Many people, maybe they do not know the ruling. And
is this closer to the hijab? I mean, not the hijab, but the dress style of the women of Jahiliyyah, where they used to show a part of the chest.
Right.
Actually, like they would be dressed and they would show part.
Actually, as is mentioned in the tafsir of the ayah, that they would show the neck.
The neck.
Not even part of the chest. So, and that was considered to be the attire of the Jahiliyyah that Islam came in to correct.
How about today's attire?
It's a very sad thing, and that's why when some women, they need to be convinced that this is causing harm for them to. They're nice people. They care about people in their country and so on.
Yes.
They don't think that this is causing harm to men, for example, and they would say men should lower their gaze. Of course, the harm is something that is very clear, but isn't it enough that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders, and we're supposed to submit ourselves to the orders of Allah, whether you know the wisdom or not? It's enough for you as a Muslim to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and having the good expectations that this is for your own goodness and for the goodness of the society in large, because you are causing so much harm to your religion and the religion of others, that sins are being committed in an extended way. And this is the reality of the human beings. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most merciful. So it's enough for us to know that this is the orders of Allah and to submit ourselves and to seek the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Jazakallah khairan. It's very useful today, and at the same time also entertaining, especially when we talk about the questions. We get to go everywhere. We get to answer questions in multiple latitudes. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward you for your knowledge and your time. Barakallah feek. Jazakallah khairan. My dear brothers and sisters, especially my dear sisters, thank you so much for being with us in this past hour on your program, Dear Sisters. Inshallah, we hope to see you again in a future episode. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives. Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives. Dear sisters, let us get closer to Allah. Dear sisters, let us learn of Rasulullah. Dear sisters, let's make the future bright. Dear sisters, mothers, daughters, and wives.